2:17. Send the light. 2:17. We'll sing all 4 verses. There's a cold country or a restless place in the line. Send the light, send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue, there are souls to save. Send the light, send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine, from shore to shore, from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine, forevermore, forevermore. We have heard the Macedonian call today. Send the light, send the light, send the light. In the golden offering at the cross we lay. Send the light, 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 the blessed gospel light. Let it shine, from shore to shore, to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine, forevermore, evermore. Let us pray that grace may everywhere abound. Send the light, send the light, send the light, send the light. In the Christ-like Spirit everywhere be found. Send the light, send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine, from shore to shore, to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine, forevermore, evermore. Let us not grow weary in the work of love. Send the light, send the light, send the light, send the light. Let us gather jewels for a crown of love. Send the light, send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine, from shore to shore, shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine, forevermore, evermore.
Good morning. As you know, we've been studying through the book of Philippians, and we are in, I'm not sure if this mic's on, we are in chapter 1, and but we have some things that we need to be talking about, and so we've shifted a little bit for a few weeks, probably 3, maybe 4, and going to talk about qualifications of elders for a while. And 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1 is where we find these lists given to us, and there are other passages that give us more information about the work of elders or shepherds. And there are different words that we find used to classify the men who hold this office. They are from various passages. Ephesians 4:11, you find it in Acts chapter 20, verse 28. 1 Peter chapter 5, 1 through 5, of course, these passages as well. And you find terminology like elders. You find the term overseer. You will find the term bishop, depending on your translation, pastor, which is not the preacher, but it is these men who are qualified, who oversee the flock, the entire congregation, and you see shepherd. And so with those terms, they're all a reference to the men who are holding the office over the church, as Jesus Christ has delegated authority for there to be men on earth who stand as the shepherds over the flock, to look after the sheep, to feed them, to provide for them, care for them, protect them, to make sure they have what they need, to help them get to heaven, to set an example for the sheep to look to and to follow. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. As you know, we would love to make sure that we have an eldership here at the Sullivan Village Church of Christ. One of our elders is very sick. And so with that situation, we are going to try to salvage our eldership by finding a man or men among us that we can see the qualifications are met and see that this man is or men are put in as an elder or elders. And that's the hope, that's the goal. If possible, that's what we're going to try to do. And so we're going to do the teaching on this and look at it. And it's not going to be an exhaustive teaching. I'm not going to go extremely deep into any of this, but we are going to be looking at it. There are 23 or 24 different qualifications, depending on how you count them. 20 of them apply to every Christian. So as we look at these, be examining your own heart, your own life. These are things that as you mature in Christ, God expects all of us to be having as characteristics, the kind of character we should be bearing out as Christian men and women. And so be considering yourself not as a position to an eldership necessarily, but to be a mature Christian, to be found faithful in God's sight and pleasing in His sight. But there are a few that, like being married, being a man and a husband, being a father, having children, being able to teach, that may be specific to a certain individual. And we'll look at those closely because there are debates about certain things, and I'll show both sides of that. But this morning we want to consider the passage from 1 Timothy chapter 3. If you would like to turn over there, I didn't put the text on the screen today for you, but 1 Timothy chapter 3, and we're just going to read the first 7 verses, and we'll just kind of walk down through here one by one. He begins by saying, "It is a trustworthy statement. If any man aspires to the office of overseer, it is a fine work he desires to do. An overseer, then, must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, prudent, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not addicted to wine or pugnacious, but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. But if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care of the church of God? And not a new convert, so that he will not become conceited and fall into the condemnation incurred by the devil. And he must have a good reputation with those outside the church, so that he will not fall into reproach and the snare of the devil." And so we're going to be looking at this list and considering what it means to be an overseer or a shepherd to take care of the flock of God here at Sullivan Village. And so the first thing that I want you to notice is the desire. And some folks do not consider this to be an actual qualification. However, it is mentioned and it is a must. And so you can call it a qualification or a preclusion to being qualified. However you want to make the term, it seems to me that this has to be a factor. You see it there in verse 1. He says, "It is a trustworthy statement if any man aspires." That's the first word. If any man aspires to the office of overseer, it is a fine work he desires to do. Aspires and desires. And these words are complementary to one another. One's a little bit stronger. But the first word, aspire, it means you're seeking to accomplish something. You're striving to accomplish something. You desire to accomplish something. This is not the idea that some man is chomping at the bit. He can't wait to get into this authority role so that he can run the church, and he wants to be up there. He can't wait to get that title and be in that position. It's not that. Folks, that's not the desire we're talking about. That may be a wrongful desire, and somebody who's too eager for it, you probably want to say, I don't know, this is a good candidate. He's a little too eager for this office. Most men approach this with a lot of humility. They're really not excited to have more responsibility on them, but they have a desire to accomplish something. And what they want to accomplish is seeing Christians make it to heaven. And they realize they're in a position to be as an example and a leader and a teacher and to help those Christians. They want to see God's church be protected from dark forces and from false teaching and from those types of things. And so their desire is to accomplish that. And if they can serve in some way to do that, they have that desire. The word desire is even stronger, and they have this strong longing and yearning. And it would be along the same lines. The longing and yearning isn't for them to have some position. The longing and yearning is for them to help accomplish God's will. And Christ's desire is to feed the flock, shepherd the flock, protect the flock, be there to look after those sheep. And that's what they have the longing for. They want to see God's sheep protected, cared for, and they want them to get to heaven. And that's what's deep inside of them. That's the desire that they must have. And so that's what we're talking about. And in the first century, there were people who might have had an ill-motivated desire because, as you know, shepherds who were doing a lot of teaching could be receiving double pay. They were paying shepherds. We don't do that today. We could. It's scriptural. But we typically don't do that today. Different culture. But there were men who you can imagine saying, I can't wait to get to that position because then I could get, extra money. And so they would do it for that reason. And so there was some of that going on, and people who may have wanted to just have authority, and they wanted to be able to be in charge, and then it could be my way. And so all of that would obviously be something you would not want as an elder. And then he says here that it is a fine work he desires to do. The word work, it means activity, a task. It describes a doer. And so this is a work. This does require work of you. And somebody who's already, completely expended, and, there are people who work 90 to 100 hours a week or whatever, and they get home and they just want food and to go to bed. They barely have any time for their family as it is because of the grueling nature of their schedule. Folks, that would not be a good candidate for an elder. Okay, they're just not going to have any time to do the work. You're going to have to devote time to sheep. And if you I'm not saying elders can't have jobs. I'm saying if your job is just that taxing, it's not a good idea. You're going to need to have some leeway in your schedule for sheep. That's going to be a part of it. And so we certainly aren't looking for a man just to wear a title, but a man who's ready to work and serve as the spiritual overseer. He says it's a fine work, which means it's purposeful, it's useful, it's excellent. This is a noble work. It's a good work. And God is pleased with this. So being an elder requires work. It's a task, and you are going to be doing an excellent, noble, useful task for God. And so just as God does not want somebody to give of their means grudgingly, God loves the cheerful giver who gives out of his heart willingly. He would not want somebody to step into a position like this grudgingly or under compulsion. It would be something that it would be a pleasure for you to serve in this way. You would be honored to try to help people get to heaven and serve God's flock. Secondly, what we want to look at is they're above reproach. An overseer then must be above reproach. And this means they're irreproachable. To reproach someone means that there's a good reason to express disappointment, disapproval of their actions for one reason or another. There's something to be reproached. There's something to be disappointed about. And so we're looking for a man, and I'm going to say this just to get it out of the way so we don't have to keep saying it. We'll say it once. Obviously, we're not looking for a sinless man. Everyone knows that. Okay, so to throw that out there at the end of this and say, well, we're not looking for a sinless man. We know that. We're not looking for a sinless man. There's only one man that was ever sinless. That was Jesus Christ. But we are looking for an exemplary man. Okay? We are looking for a man that's living a life of a certain caliber, of Christian maturity, and who has these qualifications, who is obviously not sinless. They're not perfect. We're not going to find that. Okay? We're not looking for that. But we're looking for somebody that's worthy of following. Is the example of the way that they manage their life worthy of following? That's what we're looking for. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and get that one out of the way. So they're above reproach. There's not some criticism that's going to stick against their conduct. I mean, it's just not going to stick. Somebody who tries to criticize a man who's living an exemplary life, you're not going to get any takers on that. You're going to end up looking foolish trying to make those criticisms because it's just nitpicky. It's not really something that you can say, well, this man really has some things here that would be bad as an example. If you put the man up and said, here's our elder, our brand new elder, and the church says, okay, let's follow him. How does he manage things? Would that be a good thing? That's what we're looking for, okay? So by no means perfect, but they are somebody who, criticism's not going to stick well when you try to scrutinize them. You can find fault with anybody if you get out a big enough microscope, but if you're doing that, I would suggest turn that microscope around and start looking at yourself with the same scrutiny, and you probably become a much better Christian very quick. The next one is a husband of one wife. We're going to come back to this one. We're not going to talk about this one today. We'll probably look at this one next week. There's a few, and by the way, Timothy and Titus, the lists overlap. Sometimes you see things in both lists, and sometimes it's different. He adds something new. Here's another one, temperate, which has the idea of self-control, depending on the translation you have. And so this is somebody who is living a sober manner of life. They're restraining themselves from certain things. They're orderly in their conduct. Their manner of life is just under control. They're not out of control. They're not excessive. And so 1 Timothy 3:11, even to the wives of elders and deacons, they must be dignified, not malicious gossips, but temperate. That's our word. So even the wives of an elder would need to be temperate, controlled, reserved. Titus 2, verse 2, older men are to be temperate. So even if you're not an elder, if you're an older man, you are to be temperate. It's expected by God to be temperate. And so this means you are keeping your passions under control, your conduct is balanced, you're not rash or unreasonable. Another qualification he mentions is prudent, or you might have sober-minded or sensible in your translation. This means you behave in a controlled way. There's like 3 or 4 of these that actually go back to the idea of some semblance of self-control. It's amazing how much self-control is a factor in being an elder. You have to have control of your life. Prudent, it means sober-minded, sensible, to behave in a controlled and thoughtful way, exercise care and consideration for others. Again, older men are to be temperate, dignified, sensible. So even older men must have these qualities in their life. Titus 2:5, the young women are said they need to be sensible, pure, workers at home, kind, subject to their own husbands. And so again, you see these words emphasized for Christians in general. Young women, older men. As a Christian, we should be prudent. We should all be sensible. Another one is respectable. Respectable, good behavior, expected of all Christians. Having characteristics and qualities that evoke admiration and a high regard from others. And it means that people, they view your life, your life commands respect. You probably get comments from people, you know what, you're a good man. You're a really good man. You know what, I look up to you. I thank you so much for the example you set. It's just something worthy of respect. It commands respect. And so some people's lives just command respect. They're such a reserved person. They are concerned with other people. They are seeking to live a good life. They're morally upright. They're responsible. They manage things well. They are what we're looking for. That's what it is. And so they are respectable. People respect them, honor them. It's undeniable. They're living a high quality of life. Another one is hospitable. Well, did I skip hospitable? I guess I did. Wait, no. Yeah, I skipped hospitable. Okay, well, we're going to talk about hospitable before we go any further. I just didn't put it in there. Hospitable is coming from 2 Greek words. It means foreign and love. It's literally the love of strangers. The love of strangers. And a stranger is not the only person you need to be showing hospitality to. Sometimes we show hospitality to brethren. That's part of it, isn't it? One another. 1 Peter 4:9 says, be hospitable to one another without complaint. Can you imagine somebody comes through town, they need a place to stay, you put them up into your house, you give them a bedroom and a bathroom to use, you feed them, house them for several days, send them on their way, and then as soon as they walk out the door, oh, brother, now I got to clean all this bedding and do all this laundry and wash all these dishes. They ate half my food in my pantry. Hospitality without complaint. You enjoy doing it. It's a pleasure to be that person. This is what we're looking for. Hebrews 13:2, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. I believe that's still possible. Some people think that was relegated to the first century, that you could entertain angels without knowing it. Guess we'll never know until we get there. But I believe you could still entertain angels without knowing it. Maybe that person you think is just a person is actually an angel in disguise. Or maybe angels are watching from a distance while you're entertaining that guest or denying that guest. Angels are standing by. It may be in that sense. But elders of the church ought to be foremost in setting the example by showing that hospitality. In the old days, people used to travel a lot. Preachers were always on the go. They would pay them with chickens, I hear, and eggs and different things like that. And it wasn't uncommon. Maybe your parents or grandparents would have people in their homes on a regular basis. You watch the old Western movies, same thing. People are traveling the frontier, and they would stop in wherever there was a ranch or a farm, and woman was usually right out there, the wife of the home. She'd say, come on in here, and cooking a meal and everything. That's just how it was. And they call that Southern hospitality, right? That's the idea. And you would help people who were spreading the truth. John, he prohibited showing hospitality to people who were spreading false teachings. In 2 John, you remember verses 10 and 11, he said, don't even give them a greeting, let alone roll out a red carpet, bring them into your house and give them a place to stay and warm meal. No. They're preaching a false doctrine. You do not bid them farewell in a pleasant manner. You're not going to show them hospitality. You be joining in their evil deed, participating in furthering that false doctrine. You're fellowshipping it in that sense. Doesn't mean you're not a nice, kind person, but you're not going to fellowship false doctrine. So today we offer people the best chair or a nice glass of iced tea, and maybe if they need a bedroom, we have a spare room, we put them up. We do what we can to show hospitality. And so all of these things are necessary. For an elder, he needs to be foremost in showing that. Able to teach, I did put that one in there. We're going to come back to that one and talk about that next week. Not addicted to alcohol. The words here in the Greek literally is two words that make up this one here. It's near and wine. It's the idea of being near wine. And an elder shouldn't even have anything to do with it. It's just not a part of his lifestyle. He's not spending time near the bar. He's not got a liquor cabinet at his house. He's just nowhere near it. And so he's not involved. It's abstinence of alcoholic beverages. This isn't suggesting that he is just having a few drinks, but he's not getting sloppy, drunk, and falling down and vomiting. But he likes to throw back a couple beers with the boys from time to time and catch a little buzz. He's just a moderate drinker, a social drinker. It's not talking about that. This is a guy who has nothing to do with alcohol. It's not wise. You just read Proverbs, and clearly you can see it's not wise to be involved with it. Timothy obviously had this attitude toward it. He didn't assume that he could take any wine. Paul told him to take a little with water for his stomach's sake. So for medicinal purposes, he was to take a little bit. And that was being told to do by the Apostle Paul. So it wasn't something he just assumed he could do. Not pugnacious is another one. And your translation may have violent. We don't really use the word pugnacious much today, but maybe violent is better. An elder should never be physically violent in his relationships. Can you imagine? You know, this is our new elder at the Sullivan Village Church of Christ. Oh, there he is, pulling in now into the parking lot. Oh, it seems that somebody else has parked in his spot, and the guy jumps out of his truck and starts whacking this guy. That would not be a good scene, wouldn't it? We certainly don't want violence from the eldership or from any Christian for that matter. Maybe the guy was drinking intoxicating beverages, and that's where the violence came from. I don't know. But I don't think that's going to be a problem here at all. I haven't seen anybody punch anybody out lately. Gentle. And so instead of drinking and violence, he needs to be a gentle man. And so he's controlled in his tempers and his emotions. Again, this goes back to being self-controlled. This is like the third or fourth term, hasn't it? They're yielding in their relationships with others. Paul uses this to describe the servant of the Lord ought to be gentle in 2 Timothy 2:24. And so again, another term emphasizing the need for self-control. So far in this list, we've got temperate, prudent, respectable, now gentle, all of these in some way, shape, or form, talking about the type of control this man has over his own faculties, his own life, his own circumstances. And so whoever the man is we're looking for, he's a man who demonstrates he has control and management over his life. He's not out of control. And you could look at a lot of things. You could talk about his tongue. Is his tongue under control, or is it just constantly let loose? Does he listen? Is he, somebody who is careful with his tongue? His finances, how's his spending? Is his spending out of control? Is it just one debt on top of another, on top of another, on top of another? He's up to his neck in debt. He has no ability, no wiggle room. That's control. Do you have control of your situation? What about his temper? Does he have control of his temper? Do you see him flying off the handle, getting angry? Controlling your life. This is the general idea. Controlling your life. How is it look if we were to follow the control? What about your time? Time management is a big thing. Can you control your time? Okay? Do you give time frivolously away and it's not used and managed well? Are you on time? Are you somebody who shows up when you're supposed to be there? Are you habitually doing things that fall outside of these categories of control? If so, you wouldn't make a good example for the church to follow, because everybody's going to be looking at you saying, here's the example we now have to follow. And so we need to be looking for somebody who is demonstrating control in their life. Simple things, basic things. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, these are some things I need to work on, then you start working on them. And if you're a possible candidate for an elder, it may be in a couple of years you're right where you need to be. If there's some things you need to shore up. Peaceable is another one. Self-control is a big one, and it covers a lot of different aspects of your life. Peaceable. You're not quarrelsome or contentious. You could say this has to do with control as well, because you're controlling yourself from getting involved in quarrels. You're not going to be quarreling back and forth. You're not contentious. An elder should not be inclined to quarrel and fight. Disputes, fighting. We could probably have taken most of Glenn's lesson this morning and just used that for the qualifications, basically talking about love and so forth. And so a lot of these things just overlap. Disputing, fighting. What did Paul warn Timothy about? Don't get involved in quarreling with the Jews. Those Judaizers. All they wanted to do was talk about their genealogies. They wanted to talk about some myths. They wanted to talk about these specific little tiny things from back in the law and draw them out and make big disputes about them and go on and on and on. And we have people in the brotherhood today that do that. They'll dispute you about anything. It's this, it's that, we need to be careful we don't allow false doctrine to come in and clearly teach the truth, but to get involved in every little battle and every little fight out there is foolish. It's foolish. And so we've got to stay away from that, especially as elders. So you can contend for the faith without being quarrelsome about it. A lot of the time it may not be best to go back and forth with an individual about some little thing. The best time to handle it is to get up and teach about it and put it to bed that way and just allow the Bible to do the speaking. And then there's no quarrel about it. A contentious spirit is an obstacle to unity and growth, which is basically the Bible class in churches today, and it's destructive among elders. They're not in love with money. They're not greedy. They're not covetous. Hebrews 13:5 is the only other place you find this word. And it says there, make sure that your character is free from the love of money, being content with what you have. How do we know what being in love with money looks like? It means you're not content. It means you're not content. You are constantly wanting more and more. There's a greed, and there's no end to it. Again, back to managing money. This would be a factor, because how you manage your own finances, guess what? What you do with little is what you're going to do with much. How are you going to manage the Lord's finances if you can't even manage your own? That would be the picture we're looking at. So somebody obviously who has learned to budget, they've learned to live beneath their means, they've not got themselves so deep in debt that they are just up to their neck, they have no real room to wiggle, they're not able to save any or be generous and give extra or invest. These types of things are a picture of the type of control that has been exercised over those fleshly appetites and spending and desires and this and that and the other. And so it's got to be a guy who's not discontent, in love with money, greedy for more to the point that he's going to expend himself beyond his means and put himself into a position like that of financial crisis. And then another one is manages his household well. This is referring to children, believing children, managing his children well. We're going to talk about that one next time, as you might have guessed. Not a new convert. And so this man has been a Christian for some years. He has maturity. He's demonstrating the fruit of the Spirit. He's not inexperienced. He's going to be a good leader. He's been around the church. He knows how things work. He's grown. He's learned. He knows the truth. Paul gives us the reason why he shouldn't be a new convert here in this text. And it's in verse 6 of 1 Timothy 3. It's so that he will not become conceited and fall into the condemnation incurred by the devil. What condemnation did the devil incur? Well, we know he's reserved for the lake of fire with the beast and the false prophet, and there's no escaping that for him. He has basically gone to the place where he gave up his stead, and he went outside of the bounds of that to the point where he has been condemned by God, eternally condemned. His sentence has already been given. It has not been carried out yet, but it's been stated. And God has already said that Satan, who once was an angel, once in good standing with God, made some decisions, sinned, and put himself into a position where he's no longer going to be in God's favor. He's cast away from God for eternity. That's the condemnation of the devil. And we do not want to fall into that. Neither do we want to have a man put into the position that would compromise his soul. And so it's dangerous if somebody's a new convert. You'll have churches out there. I know we would never do that here, but there are churches out there that'll ignore things like this. And they'll take a man who's been a Christian for a year, and because everybody likes him and thinks he's a good man and whatnot, they'll say, well, he's going to be a great elder. Yeah, but he's still a new convert. I know, but don't worry about it. He's going to be okay. The Bible warns against it. It's best to just listen to the Scriptures and go by that. They will fall into the condemnation of the devil by becoming conceited. And so, like I said, I doubt that would ever happen here. I don't think so. Another one is good reputation to those outside. And so they have a good reputation, a good testimony. They're spoken well of. They're thought highly of. People outside the church, they see them. They think highly of them. They speak good of them. And Paul gives a reason for this one. He says, so that he will not fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. And isn't it interesting, these last two we're looking at here have to do with the devil. He mentions in connection with the devil. The condemnation of the devil and the snare of the devil. What kind of snare do you think the devil is going to put forward? This tells you a little bit about what Satan's going to try to do to an elder, right? Satan is going to try to use anything he can get to discredit the elder, and he will use that from the world. The world is going to judge the church based on its leadership. I've seen it here at Sullivan Village. I've seen people, in fact, I'm not going to say anything too specific, but there was somebody who left here very disgruntled and cussing in their message they left on the telephone, and it was a cuss-filled rant, and the primary thing they were saying was against an elder. That's what they were doing, trying to take shots against an elder. Nothing they said had any real merit. They were just angry and trying to find something. But I remember that. And that was somebody who was lost trying to discredit the eldership. That's what the world does. They'll look right to the leader and they'll say, there's something here. Oftentimes there's nothing there that'll stick to anything. But if there is, that man shouldn't be an elder. If he's got a bad reputation in the community, it's best to just continue working on being a better guy and making a better reputation. Peter says in 1 Peter 2:12 to keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, observe them and glorify God in the day of visitation. That's the goal. And in verse 15 he says, for such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. And so even people who are out there foolish, ignorantly speaking against you, if you're living an exemplary life, it'll eventually humble them and they'll be silenced, realizing they've betrayed innocent blood, as Judas realized once he made his deal. And hopefully they'll come to their senses and obey the gospel. So an elder must have a sufficient number of years in the faith, and his changed lifestyle should be recognized by all. And so these are the ones that I wanted to cover today, and we're going to look at the rest of the list in Titus chapter 1, and the ones that we skipped, we're going to go back over those and look at those a little closer. But this is something I'm going to ask from all of you, and I know Glenn is asking the same thing, is for prayers on this. This is the greatest thing you can do to partner in this work at this point, is just be praying day and night. Pray continuously that God would help us to see the way forward, that He would select the man. You say, well, how does He do that? We don't cast lots. The Holy Spirit has made you overseers, and that's done by these qualifications. So God selects the man based on the criteria we have before us. And we're going to do our dead level best to teach what it says and make those selections and see if we can continue to have an eldership here. Be praying for that, please. And so if you have a need this morning, maybe it has nothing to do with what we've talked about, but it may be something that's been on your heart. Maybe you're ready to become a Christian this morning. You want to obey the gospel. If you've studied and you know what you need to do, we would be willing to assist you in that. If you need to study more and you need to go through some studies, we would love to help you with that too. And we would be willing, after services, if you get a hold of us, we'll sit down and study with you and start going through the study so that you know what you need to know before taking on that responsibility. When you become a Christian, you're giving yourself to a covenant of Jesus Christ. And then you're expected to live as a Christian and start growing and studying His Word. Well, if you have a need to repent of some sin this morning, we can also help you with that. We can pray and ask God to forgive you of whatever it is that's heavy on your heart. So if you have a need, we invite you to come forward as we stand and as we sing.
What can wash